The plasma bolts screamed past his head as he dove behind the twisted wreckage of what had once been a luxurious transport vessel. The acrid smell of burning metal filled his nostrils, mixing with the strange, sweet scent of alien blood that painted the corridor walls in shades of deep purple. His combat armor's display flickered warnings about hull breaches and atmospheric pressure drops, but had learned long ago to tune out the machine's panic. The palace ship Eternal Majesty was dying around them, its elegant curves and crystalline structures reduced to a maze of debris and corpse-filled corridors. What had started as a diplomatic escort mission had turned into a nightmare when the raiders struck without warning. The invaders had torn through the palace defenses like paper, their acid weapons dissolving both armor and flesh with equal efficiency. Pressed his back against the makeshift cover and checked his weapon's charge. 70% remaining. Not great, but it would have to do. Through the smoke and chaos, he could hear the distinctive chittering of warriors as they swept through the ship, hunting down survivors. The sound made his skin crawl. It was like listening to 1,000 angry crickets, if crickets were 7 feet tall and armed with bioweapons that could melt a man's face off. "Human soldier," the voice was melodic despite the fear that laced through it, speaking in accented but clear standard. Turned toward the sound and felt his breath catch. Huddled in an alcove behind him was the most beautiful creature he had ever seen. Empress of the Empire stood barely 5.5 feet tall, her slender frame wrapped in torn silk robes that had once been the color of starlight. Her skin held a subtle blue luminescence, like moonlight on water, and her large violet eyes dominated a face that was simultaneously alien and achingly familiar. Delicate antennae, no thicker than silver wire, emerged from her temples and flickered nervously as she spoke. "My guards," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They abandoned me when the raiders broke through. 30 years of loyal service, and when death came calling, they ran like cowards." Her hands trembled as she clutched what appeared to be a ceremonial to her chest. "I am sorry you must witness such shame." Had heard about honor culture during his briefings. Their society was built on complex codes of loyalty and duty that made ancient Japanese Bushido look casual by comparison. For her personal guard to abandon their empress was not just cowardice, it was a cultural catastrophe that would echo through generations. "Your Majesty," said, keeping his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "I'm Sergeant, 3rd Human Colonial Marines. I'm going to get you out of here." The Empress's antennae twitched in what had learned was surprise. "Human? But your people have no obligation to the throne. We are not even formally allied. Why would you risk your life for me?" Checked his motion scanner. 3 contacts approaching from the port corridor, moving fast. He had maybe 2 minutes before they would be discovered. "Because it's the right thing to do, Your Majesty, and where I come from we don't abandon people who need help." The Empress stared at him with those impossible violet eyes. In the 37 years since humans had made first contact with the galactic community, they had developed a reputation as skilled warriors and stubborn allies. But they were also known for their unpredictability, a species that would charge headfirst into certain death for strangers, yet could show mercy to defeated enemies. Most aliens found human behavior baffling. The Empress was beginning to understand why. A distant explosion shook the ship, and emergency lighting bathed the corridor in hellish red. Grabbed the Empress's hand, noting how delicate her fingers felt despite their obvious strength. "We need to move. They are sweeping this section, and this cover won't hold them for long." "Where can we go?" asked. "The entire ship is compromised. My flagship escorts were destroyed in the initial attack. There is nowhere to run." Pulled up the ship's schematics on his armor's display. The Eternal Majesty was massive, nearly 2 kilometers long, and designed more like a floating palace than a military vessel. But every ship had blind spots, maintenance areas that raiders might overlook in their rush to secure valuable targets. "There," he said, highlighting a section near the ship's core. "Environmental processing. It's not glamorous, but we'll focus on bridge, quarters, and treasure vaults first. We can hold out there until rescue arrives." "Rescue?" The Empress's laugh held no humor. "Who would come? My own guards fled at the first sign of danger. My nobles are probably already negotiating surrender terms. I am alone, human. We are alone." The chittering grew louder, accompanied by the wet sound of acid eating through metal. Hefted his rifle and checked the power cell one more time. "Then will have to be enough." The next hour was a blur of desperate movement through smoke-filled corridors. Led the way, his armor's sensors painting hostile contacts in threatening red as they ducked, weaved, and occasionally fought their way deeper into the ship. The Empress moved with surprising grace for someone wearing formal court robes, her natural agility allowing her to keep pace despite the awkward clothing. They encountered their first patrol near the ceremonial gardens. 3 of the insect-like raiders were systematically destroying priceless art, their mandibles clicking with what could only assume was laughter. He signaled for the Empress to stay low and raised his rifle. The first shot took the lead in the center of its chitinous chest, the high-energy pulse burning through its natural armor like butter. The creature's death scream brought its companions around just in time to meet 2 more precisely placed shots. Within seconds, all 3 raiders were down, their acidic blood hissing as it ate into the deck plating. "Remarkable," the Empress whispered as they stepped over the bodies. "I have seen warriors in action before. They are formidable opponents, yet you dispatched them as if they were mere insects." Reloaded his weapon with practiced efficiency. "They are insects, Your Majesty, big, mean, ugly insects, and humans have been dealing with pest control for thousands of years." Despite everything, the Empress smiled. It was the first time had seen her expression lighten since this nightmare began, and it transformed her entire face. For a moment, the weight of royal responsibility fell away, revealing something almost girlish underneath. "You are unlike the other humans I have met," she said as they continued through the gardens. "Most of your kind are so serious when dealing with royalty. You speak to me as if I were simply another person." "Aren't you?" asked, then immediately wondered if he had crossed some invisible line. Human diplomacy with alien royalty was still a work in progress. But the Empress's smile only widened. "Perhaps it has been so long since anyone dared to suggest such a thing." Her expression grew thoughtful. "Tell me, Sergeant, do you have a family on you?" "A sister," replied, helping the Empress over a fallen beam. "Sarah, she's a teacher on New Angels, spends her time trying to convince 12-year-olds that algebra is important for their futures. And yet you chose to serve in the military, far from home." Considered the question as they navigated a corridor filled with emergency foam. "Someone has to stand between the darkness and the light. Might as well be me." The Environmental Processing Center was exactly as ugly as I'd expected. Massive atmospheric recyclers hummed and wheezed, processing the ship's air through filters that looked like they hadn't been cleaned in months. Pipes and conduits covered every surface, creating a mechanical maze that would provide excellent defensive positions. More importantly, the section appeared to be deserted. The had apparently decided that life support equipment wasn't worth their immediate attention. Helped the Empress to a relatively clean spot behind one of the larger recycling units and began setting up defensive positions. His armor's sensors showed no immediate threats, but he knew that wouldn't last. Sooner or later, the raiders would expand their search pattern. "Sergeant," the Empress said softly, "there is something you should know about the item I carry." She held up the ceremonial she had been clutching throughout their escape. "This contains the complete defensive codes for the border systems. If it falls into hands, they will have access to 17 inhabited worlds containing over 2 billion souls." Felt his blood chill. No wonder the raiders had targeted the palace ship. This wasn't just a raid for treasure or prisoners. It was a strategic strike that could break the entire defense network. "Why didn't you destroy it?" he asked. "The codes reset every 72 hours, the Empress explained. "If I destroy this pad before the next reset, those worlds will be defenseless against any threat, not just my people would die either way." "So we need to hold out for how long?" The Empress checked the pad's chronometer. 47 hours, 18 minutes. Did some quick math. His armor's power would last maybe 12 hours in combat mode. His rifle had enough charge for perhaps 6 major firefights. Food and water weren't immediate concerns, but exhaustion would be. And all of that assumed they didn't simply decide to vent this section to space. "Well," he said, checking his weapon one more time, "I've had worse odds." The Empress tilted her head, antennae twitching with curiosity. "Truly." "Once held off an entire pirate fleet with nothing but a broken shuttle and a really big asteroid," replied. "Course, that was with a full squad. This time it's just me." "Just you," the Empress repeated. "One human soldier against an entire raiding force." "Don't forget yourself, Your Majesty. I may be the one with the gun, but you're the one they're really after. Without you, that is just an expensive paperweight." For the first time since her guards had fled, Empress felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the political hope of diplomatic solutions or military rescue, but the simple, human hope that came from finding an unexpected ally in the darkness. The human beside her was everything her guards had not been: calm under pressure, decisive in action, and seemingly incapable of abandoning his duty. She had grown up hearing stories of human stubbornness, but seeing it in person was something else entirely. "Sergeant," she said formally, "in the name of the Empire and by my authority as Empress, I hereby appoint you as my personal protector. Do you accept this responsibility?" Looked up from his equipment check, surprised. "Your Majesty, I'm not sure that's necessary. I'm already committed to getting you out of here." "Nevertheless, I would have it be official. My people will need to know that when my guards failed, a human stood in their place. When they ask how the Empire survived, I want to tell them that courage came from the stars in the form of a colonial marine who refused to surrender." The sincerity in her voice made his chest tight. He had joined the military to protect people, but he had never expected to find himself responsible for the fate of entire worlds. The weight of it should have been crushing, but instead he felt strangely calm. This was what he had trained for, what he had dedicated his life to. The scale was bigger than he had imagined, but the mission was the same: stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. "I accept, Your Majesty," he said solemnly. "I will protect you and that with my life." "I know you will," the Empress replied, "and I will ensure that your people know what you have done here." A new sound echoed through the environmental center, the methodical clank of heavy boots on metal decking. The had found them. Raised his rifle and moved to the nearest firing position. "Looks like we're about to find out just how stubborn humans can be." The Empress gripped her and prepared to witness something her royal education had never prepared her for: a human at war. The first scout rounded the corner like a nightmare made flesh. 7 feet of chitinous armor and razor-sharp limbs, its compound eyes swept the environmental chamber with mechanical precision. Held his breath, finger hovering over the trigger of his rifle as the creature's mandibles clicked in what he had learned was their version of communication. The raider was alone, which meant it was either incredibly confident or incredibly stupid. Was betting on stupid. They were formidable warriors, but they relied heavily on swarm tactics and overwhelming force. Individual initiative wasn't their strong suit. The creature took 3 more steps into the chamber before fired. The plasma bolt caught its center mass, punching through its natural armor and dropping it before it could even scream. The body hit the deck with a wet thud that seemed to echo forever in the mechanical maze. "Is it dead?" the Empress whispered from behind her cover. "Very," replied, already moving to a new position. "But it won't be alone for long. They travel in packs." As if summoned by his words, the chittering grew louder. Counted at least 6 distinct voices, possibly more. His armor's sensors were having trouble penetrating all the metal in this section, but thermal imaging suggested a dozen hostiles approaching from 3 different directions. The sergeant smiled grimly. In the open corridors, those numbers would have been overwhelming. But here, surrounded by pipes and machinery that broke up sight lines and limited movement, the numerical advantage was severely reduced. They would have to come at him in small groups, filtering through narrow spaces where his superior marksmanship could make the difference. "Your Majesty," called softly, "I need you to stay exactly where you are no matter what happens. Keep that safe and let me worry about our uninvited guests." The first serious attack came from the main entrance. 3 burst through simultaneously, their acid sprayers already charging. Was ready for them. His first shot took the leader in the head, exploding its skull in a shower of green ichor. The second blast caught the next raider in the thorax, spinning it around before it collapsed. The third managed to return fire, sending a stream of corrosive death towards position. The human rolled away as the acid ate through the metal where he had been standing. This triumph was short-lived. Came up from his roll in a perfect firing stance and put 2 shots through the creature's center mass. 3 down, he muttered, checking his rifle's charge, 60% remaining. The next wave came from 2 directions at once. Heard them coming and made a split-second decision. Instead of trying to defend from a static position, he moved aggressively toward the eastern approach, catching the off guard as they expected him to retreat. His first shot caught the lead raider in the leg, sending it tumbling into its companion. Second shot finished both of them as the plasma bolt passed through the first and struck the second. Before the remaining two could react, had already moved again, using the maze of pipes to break their line of sight. Clever, the Empress observed, her voice filled with admiration despite the danger. You fight like a dancer, not a soldier. Ducked under a stream of acid and popped up to nail another with a precise shot to the head. Dancing and fighting aren't that different, Your Majesty. It's all about reading your partner and staying one step ahead. The battle continued for nearly an hour. Wave after wave of poured into the environmental center, only to be cut down by the lone human who seemed to be everywhere at once. Used every trick he had learned in 15 years of military service, ricocheting shots off metal surfaces, using the own dead as cover, even dropping sections of pipe on top of his enemies when ammunition ran low. But for every raider he killed, two more seemed to take its place. His armor was showing damage from near misses with acid weapons, his rifle charge was down to 20%, and exhaustion was beginning to slow his reactions. It was during a brief lull in the fighting that the Empress made her decision. "Sergeant," she called out, her voice steady despite the carnage surrounding them. "I have an idea, but you must trust me completely." Paused in his equipment check to look at her. The delicate alien princess who had been cowering behind cover an hour ago was gone, replaced by someone who looked every inch the ruler of an interstellar empire. Her violet eyes burned with determination, and her antennae were rigid with resolve. "I'm listening, Your Majesty." She said, holding up the device. "What if we let them think they have it?" Before could object, the Empress was already moving. Her fingers flew across the surface with practiced skill, initiating what appeared to be a complex series of commands. "I am creating a duplicate with false codes. The real will continue updating, but this copy will contain useless information designed to look authentic." "And you want to use it as bait," realized. "Precisely. If we can convince them that one of us is trying to escape with the codes, they will focus their efforts on pursuit rather than systematic search. It might give us the breathing room we need." Consider the plan. It was risky. If the saw through the deception, they would be worse off than before. But they were already in desperate straits, and desperate times called for desperate measures. "Who carries the fake?" he asked. The Empress's antennae drooped slightly. "I had hoped you would volunteer. You are faster, more capable in combat, and more likely to survive long enough to make the deception worthwhile." "Absolutely not." His response was immediate and final. "I'm not leaving you here alone. We go together or not at all." "Sergeant, please be reasonable. This is our best chance." "No," reloaded his rifle with his last power cell. "Your Majesty, with respect, I've seen what happens when people try to be heroes by themselves. It usually ends badly for everyone involved. We're in this together." The Empress stared at him, her alien features unreadable. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. "You truly are the most stubborn creature I have ever encountered." "Thank you, Your Majesty. I'll take that as a compliment." "It was intended as one." The Empress finished her work on the duplicate. "Very well. If we are to do this together, we will need a new plan, something that uses both our abilities." Looked around the environmental center with fresh eyes. They had been attacking in waves, probing for weaknesses and gradually wearing down his defenses. But what if instead of waiting for them to come to him, he took the fight to them? "Can you access the ship's environmental controls from here?" he asked. The Empress nodded. "Basic functions, yes. Why?" "Because I have an idea that's either brilliant or suicidal, possibly both," pointed to the massive atmospheric processors that dominated the center. "These things pump air throughout the entire ship, right? Including to sections they have occupied." Understanding dawned in the Empress's violet eyes. "You want to poison them." "Not poison," corrected. "Something more subtle. Can you adjust the atmospheric mixture, reduce oxygen levels in specific sections?" "It is possible, but it would take time to have any effect. And if they realize what we are doing, they'll come running straight here," finished. "Which is exactly what I want. Instead of facing them in small groups as they search the ship, we force them to commit to a major assault while they're already weakened by oxygen deprivation." The Empress's fingers were already moving across the environmental controls. "It is ambitious, Sergeant, and extremely dangerous." "The best plans usually are." As the Empress worked to sabotage the ship's life support systems, prepared for what would likely be their final battle, he redistributed his remaining ammunition, checked his armor's integrity, and tried not to think about how many were still aboard the ship. 20 minutes later, the results of their sabotage became apparent. Could hear shouting and chittering from elsewhere in the ship as the raiders realized something was wrong. Emergency klaxons began wailing as automated systems detected the atmospheric irregularities. "They know," the Empress reported unnecessarily. "I estimate we have perhaps 10 minutes before they trace the source of the problem to this location." "Then we better make them count." Moved to his carefully prepared firing position and checked his weapon one last time. 15% charge remaining, not much, but it would have to be enough. The first sign of the coming assault was the sudden silence. The chittering and shouting stopped, replaced by an ominous quiet that made skin crawl. In his experience, silence on a battlefield usually meant someone was about to do something very unpleasant. When the attack came, it was unlike anything they had attempted before. Instead of filtering through the chamber's narrow entrances, they began cutting new ones. Acid weapons ate through the bulkheads like chainsaws through paper, creating multiple breach points simultaneously. "They learn fast," observed, trying to keep track of 6 different holes appearing in his defensive perimeter. "I'll give them that." "Can you hold them?" the Empress asked, clutching both to her chest. "Ask me in 5 minutes," replied, then opened fire on the first to emerge from the eastern breach. What followed was the most intense firefight of his career. Poured through every opening, their movements sluggish from oxygen deprivation, but their numbers seemingly endless. Moved like a man possessed, his rifle spitting death as he danced between cover points that were being rapidly destroyed by acid fire. His armor took a direct hit from a sprayer, the corrosive eating through his left shoulder plate before the emergency sealant could activate. Pain flared as some of the acid reached his skin, but pushed it aside and kept firing. 10% rifle charge. 5%. 2%. The weapon died just as put down what he hoped was the last. The sudden silence was deafening after the chaos of battle. Steam rose from pools of acid that had eaten through the deck plating, and the air was thick with the smell of burning metal and alien blood. Slumped against a damaged pipe, exhausted but alert. His armor was showing red warning lights across the board, his rifle was dead, and he had no idea how many more might be waiting elsewhere in the ship. "Are they all dead?" the Empress whispered. Before could answer, a new sound echoed through the chamber. Slow, deliberate clapping. A figure emerged from the main entrance, nada but something far worse. The harvester stood 8 feet tall and moved with fluid grace despite its obvious cybernetic enhancements. Once, it might have been organic, but now it was more machine than creature. Multiple arms ended in various weapons and tools, while a sensor array had replaced whatever eyes it once possessed. "Impressive human," the harvester said in perfect standard. Its voice was like honey poured over broken glass. "You have eliminated my entire boarding party. Such efficiency is worthy of respect." Struggled to his feet, drawing his sidearm with his good arm. The pistol felt pathetically small compared to his rifle, but it was all he had left. "Let me guess," he said, "you're the boss." "I am Harvester Prime 7 Alpha," the creature replied, "and I have come to collect what is mine." The machine's sensor array focused on the Empress, who stepped protectively behind despite the obvious futility of the gesture. "Empress of the Empire, you have caused me considerable inconvenience. Surrender the defense codes and your death will be swift." "Go to hell," said conversationally. The harvester's head tilted with mechanical precision. "An interesting response. You are clearly exhausted, wounded, and out of ammunition for your primary weapon. Your armor is damaged, your position is compromised, and you face an opponent against whom your courage and determination are entirely irrelevant. Yet you continue to defy me. Why?" Checked his pistol's charge, 70%, maybe enough for one good shot if he could get close enough. "Because someone has to." "Fascinating. Is this what your species calls honor?" "No," replied, starting to circle slowly to his left. "This is what we call Tuesday." The Empress watched in amazement as the human soldier began stalking a creature that could have torn him apart with its bare hands. There was no fear in his movements, no hesitation. He was like a predator sizing up prey, completely focused on the task at hand. "Sergeant," she said softly, "the chronometer shows 36 hours remaining until reset, if we can somehow survive." "We will," interrupted, never taking his eyes off the harvester. "I promise to get you out of this, Your Majesty, and humans always keep their promises." The harvester's weapon arms began to extend, revealing an arsenal that could level a city block. "Your species' reputation for stubbornness is well documented, human, but stubbornness will not deflect plasma bolts or turn aside molecular disruptors." Smiled, and the Empress shivered at how cold the expression looked. "Maybe not, but it might be enough to get me close enough to introduce you to my little friend here." He raised his pistol slightly. "You cannot be serious. That weapon cannot penetrate my armor." "Want to bet?" The standoff stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. The harvester's sensors swept the chamber, calculating angles and probabilities, remained perfectly still, waiting for his moment. The Empress held her breath, unable to look away from the tableau of human determination facing mechanical inevitability. When finally moved, it was with lightning speed that caught even the harvester off guard. Instead of trying to shoot from a distance, the human dove directly at his opponent, rolling under the creature's weapon arms and coming up inside its reach. The pistol fired point-blank into what hoped was a vulnerable joint. The shot was perfect, finding a gap in the harvester's armor that even its designers probably hadn't known existed. Sparks flew as critical systems failed, and the creature staggered backward. But it wasn't enough. The harvester recovered quickly, one of its weapon arms swinging around to catch across the chest. The blow sent the human flying across the chamber, his damaged armor finally failing completely as he crashed into a bank of processors. "Sergeant," the Empress cried, rushing to his side. Struggled to sit up, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. His pistol was gone, lost somewhere in the wreckage. But he was still breathing, still conscious, and that meant the fight wasn't over. The harvester approached slowly, its damaged systems sparking but still functional. "Remarkable. You actually managed to damage my primary mobility servo. I am genuinely impressed." "Thanks," wheezed. "I live to please." "Unfortunately for you, I do not share your species' appreciation for hopeless gestures." The harvester raised one of its remaining weapon arms. "Goodbye, stubborn human. Your sacrifice will be remembered by no one." The weapon charged with a high-pitched whine that seemed to go on forever. Closed his eyes, thinking of his sister Sarah and hoping she would understand why he had chosen this path. At least he had bought the Empress some time. Maybe it would be enough. The killing shot never came. Instead, heard the sound of tearing metal and the harvester's startled cry. He opened his eyes to see the most beautiful sight he had ever witnessed. A full squad of human colonial marines pouring through the breach points they had created. "This is Sergeant requesting immediate medical assistance," he managed to say into his comm unit before everything went black. Woke to the steady hum of medical equipment and the antiseptic smell of a ship's medical bay. His body felt like it had been run over by a cargo hauler, but he was alive. More importantly, he could remember why that mattered. "Your Majesty," he croaked, trying to sit up despite the protests from every muscle in his body. "Is safe," came a familiar melodic voice. Empress appeared at his bedside, looking remarkably composed for someone who had recently survived a massacre. Her court robes had been replaced by simple traveling clothes, but she still wore them with the natural grace of someone born to rule. "Thanks to your sacrifice, the defense codes remained secure until the reset occurred 6 hours ago." Relaxed back into the medical bed, relief flooding through him. "Good, that's good." He took a moment to study his surroundings. This was definitely not a ship. The clean lines and functional design screamed human military. "I take it the cavalry arrived." "Indeed they did." The Empress smiled and was struck again by how it transformed her entire face. "It seems your colonial Marine Corps takes a rather dim view of anyone who threatens their personnel. The rescue fleet arrived with what your captain described as overwhelming prejudice." "Sounds about right," winced as he shifted position. "What happened to the harvester?" "Your fellow Marines were quite thorough in their response," the Empress said diplomatically. "I believe the official report will state that Harvester Prime 7 Alpha resisted arrest with extreme prejudice and was decommissioned accordingly." Couldn't help but grin. Translation: they blew it into very small pieces. "That would be an accurate assessment, yes." A new voice interrupted their conversation. "Well, well, Sleeping Beauty finally decides to join us." Captain Sarah entered the medical bay with the confident stride of someone used to commanding starships. She was a compact woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much action, but her expression softened when she looked at. Captain attempted to salute from his prone position. "Don't you dare," said sternly. "You've been unconscious for 18 hours, Sergeant. Your body needs rest, not military protocol." She pulled up a chair next to his bed. "Besides, I think we can dispense with formalities after what you've accomplished." "I was just doing my job, ma'am." Captain laughed, a sound with little humor in it. "Your job was to provide escort security for a diplomatic mission. Fighting off an entire raiding force single-handedly while protecting galactic defense codes was definitely not in the mission parameters." "The mission parameters changed," replied simply. "That they did." His expression grew serious. "Sergeant, I want you to understand the full scope of what happened here. The raid on the Eternal Majesty was part of a coordinated assault on 17 different targets across 3 sectors. If they had succeeded in capturing those defense codes, they could have broken the entire border defense network." Felt a chill run down his spine. "How many people?" 2 billion, the Empress said quietly. "Perhaps more if they had used the captured worlds as staging areas for further expansion." Her violet eyes met his. "Your actions saved them all, Sergeant." The weight of that statement settled over like a heavy blanket. 2 billion lives. He had known the stakes were high, but the reality of it was almost too much to comprehend. "I had help," he said finally, nodding toward the Empress. "Her Majesty was the one who came up with the atmospheric sabotage plan, and she's the one who kept the real safe while I was playing soldier." Captain looked between them with interest. "Is that so? The official reports I've seen paint you as a lone hero holding off the tide of darkness." "The official reports are incomplete," said firmly. "I couldn't have done any of it without the Empress's tactical support and technical knowledge." "Interesting," made a note on her tablet. "I'll make sure the full story makes it into the final report, speaking of which there are some people who would like to speak with both of you." Over the next few hours, and the Empress were debriefed by a parade of intelligence officers, military commanders, and diplomatic representatives. The story they told together painted a picture of cooperation and mutual respect that had implications far beyond the immediate crisis. It was Admiral Hayes, commanding officer of the human colonial fleet, who finally put the larger situation into perspective. "Sergeant Empress," the Admiral began as she entered the medical bay. She was an imposing woman with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. "What the two of you accomplished has ramifications that extend far beyond the immediate military victory." Struggled to sit up, but the Admiral waved him back down. "At ease, Sergeant. You've earned the right to recuperate in comfort." "Admiral," the Empress said formally, "I understand that humanity is owed a significant debt for Sergeant's actions." "Actually, Your Majesty, that's what I wanted to discuss." Admiral Hayes pulled up a chair, her expression thoughtful. "The Empire and humanity have been cordial neighbors but never formal allies. Recent events suggest that might be a mistake on both our parts." The Empress's antennae twitched with interest. "Continue." "They aren't going to stop with this failed raid. Intelligence suggests they're preparing for a major expansion campaign that would threaten both our territories. Separately, our chances of stopping them are uncertain. Together," the Admiral smiled. "Well, let's just say the combination of technology and human tactical innovation could be quite formidable." "You're proposing a formal alliance," the Empress realized. "I'm suggesting that 2 civilizations with complementary strengths and mutual respect might find it beneficial to stand together against common threats." Admiral Hayes looked meaningfully at, and the Empress. "Recent events have demonstrated that such cooperation can produce remarkable results." Found himself caught in the middle of what was essentially a diplomatic negotiation at the highest levels. It was surreal to think that his decision to protect one alien woman had somehow become the foundation for an interstellar alliance. "If I may," he said carefully. "Your Majesty, Admiral, I think there's something you should know about what happened on the Eternal Majesty." Both women looked at him expectantly. "When they attacked, the Empress's own guards abandoned her. 30 years of loyal service, and they ran when things got difficult," met the Empress's eyes. "But that's not what I'll remember about this mission." "What will you remember, Sergeant?" Admiral Hayes asked. I'll remember an empress who stayed calm under fire, who came up with tactical solutions when I was out of ideas, and who never once suggested that saving her own life was more important than protecting 2 billion of her people. His voice grew stronger as he spoke. That's the kind of person humanity should be proud to call an ally. The Empress's luminescent skin seemed to glow a little brighter, and her antennae drooped in what had learned was embarrassment. Sergeant, you give me too much credit. You could have surrendered the codes and saved yourself. You could have asked me to abandon the mission when things looked hopeless. You could have demanded special treatment because of your rank. Shook his head. Instead, you fought alongside me as an equal. That's not something you learn in diplomatic school, Your Majesty. That's just who you are. Admiral Hayes watched this exchange with growing interest. Empress, if I may ask, what are your thoughts on the sergeant's assessment? The Empress was quiet for a long moment, her violet eyes distant. When she spoke, her voice was soft but filled with conviction. For 37 years, I have been surrounded by people who told me what they thought I wanted to hear. Courtiers who praised my wisdom while questioning my decisions behind closed doors. Guards who swore eternal loyalty while planning their escape routes. She looked at with something approaching wonder. In 18 hours, this human soldier showed me more genuine respect and partnership than I have experienced in decades of rule. And that influences your opinion of the proposed alliance, how? The Admiral pressed. If Sergeant is representative of human character, then the Empire would be honored to stand alongside humanity against any threat. The Empress's smile was radiant. I believe my people have much to learn from yours about the true meaning of loyalty and courage. Admiral Hayes nodded slowly. In that case, Your Majesty, I think we have a great deal to discuss. But first, I believe there's a matter of honors and recognition that needs to be addressed. 3 days later, stood at attention on the bridge of the human flagship Indomitable, his dress uniform crisp despite the lingering soreness in his muscles. The entire senior staff was assembled, along with a delegation from the Empire that had arrived that morning. Sergeant, Admiral Hayes began formally, for extraordinary heroism in the face of overwhelming odds, for actions that preserved the lives of billions of innocent civilians, and for conduct that exemplifies the highest ideals of the human colonial marines, you are hereby awarded the Terran Cross for valor. The medal was heavy in his hands, its weight seeming to represent all the lives that had hung in the balance. But it was the sight of Empress stepping forward that really made the moment special. Sergeant, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the bridge. By the authority vested in me as Empress of the people, I hereby grant you the Star of Eternal Friendship, the highest honor that can be bestowed upon a non. You are forever welcome in any territory as a friend and protector of the Empire. As she pinned the alien medal to his uniform, the Empress whispered, "Thank you for showing me what true friendship looks like." "Thank you, Your Majesty," he whispered back, "for trusting me to be worthy of it." The ceremony concluded with the formal signing of the Terran Mutual Defense Treaty, an agreement that would reshape the political landscape of 3 sectors. As watched the Empress and Admiral Hayes put their signatures to the historic document, he couldn't help but think about how much had changed since that desperate flight through the corridors of the Eternal Majesty. Later that evening, found himself in the ship's observation lounge, looking out at the stars while nursing a cup of coffee. The Empress found him there, having traded her formal robes for the simple traveling clothes she seemed to prefer. "May I join you?" she asked. "Of course, Your Majesty." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars wheel slowly past the viewport. Finally, the Empress spoke. "I have been thinking about what you said during the battle, about humans always keeping their promises." "What about it?" "You promised to protect me and get me out of that ship safely. You nearly died fulfilling that promise." She turned to look at him, her violet eyes serious. "I would like to make you a promise in return." Raised an eyebrow, "I'm listening." "The alliance between our peoples will face challenges. There will be political pressures, cultural misunderstandings, and individuals on both sides who oppose cooperation." The Empress's voice was steady and determined. "But I promise you, Sergeant, that as long as I draw breath, the Empire will stand by humanity. Your people showed me what loyalty truly means. I intend to return that gift." Felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. "Thank you, Your Majesty. That means more than you know." "Please," she said with that transformative smile. After everything we have been through together, I think you have earned the right to call me. In that case, welcome to the human family. As they stood together looking out at the stars, couldn't help but think about how his sister Sarah would react when she heard the full story. A simple escort mission had turned into a galaxy-changing adventure, and he had somehow found himself at the center of an alliance that would protect billions of lives. But more than that, he had found something he hadn't even known he was looking for. Proof that courage and friendship could transcend species, culture, and the vast emptiness of space. In a universe that often seemed dark and hostile, that was something worth fighting for. The Empress seemed to be thinking along similar lines. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had been assigned to a different mission that day? Consider the question seriously. Sometimes, but I've learned that wondering about might-have-beens is a waste of time. I'd rather focus on what comes next. And what do you think comes next? Smiled, thinking about all the possibilities that lay ahead. Joint training exercises between human and forces, cultural exchange programs, shared technological development, maybe even the chance to explore the galaxy together, standing against whatever threats emerged from the darkness. Adventure, he said simply. I think what comes next is adventure. Laughed, the sound bright and musical in the quiet observation lounge. I think I would like that very much. As they watched the stars together, reflected on how a single moment of choice, the decision to protect one alien woman when her own guards had fled, had somehow changed the course of galactic history. It was a humbling thought, but also an inspiring one. In a universe where different species often viewed each other with suspicion and fear, he had proven that understanding and respect could bridge any gap. Their friendship had become the foundation of an alliance that would protect countless worlds and preserve the peace for generations to come. It was, thought, a pretty good day's work for a simple soldier from New Angels, and the best part was it was only the beginning.